Today we're going to look at multiplying algebraic terms. First of all, we're going to go through last night's homework. Let's look at the first three questions. Okay, so we can see for question A, we have 2x squared and a plus 3x squared. And we have a plus 2x and a plus 5x. So when I add those two together, I get 5x squared. And when I add these two together, I get plus 7x. And that's my answer. I'll do one more, just a little bit longer, and the rest of them then I'm just going to do a little bit quick. Okay, so we see we have 3m squared and 4m squared. So 3m squared plus 4m squared gives me 7m squared. And we have 2m minus 3m. So 2 minus 3 gives me minus 1m, which we call m. C, we have minus 8q squared plus 4q squared. So minus 8 plus 4 gives me minus 4. And we just put the q squared on. And then we have minus 3 and minus q. As there's nothing we can do with them, we just put them at the end. So minus 3 minus q. For the second part of last night's homework, so for part A of question 7, we can see 2x squared plus 4x squared. So we get 6x squared there. We have a plus 5x and we have a plus 8x. So 5 plus 8 gives me 13x. And then finally we have a plus 8 and a minus 3, which gives me plus 5. And that's my final answer. The next one, so we have 5x squared minus 4x squared. That gives me 1x squared, but we know that we call it x squared. Then we have plus 3x minus x. And we know that that minus x has a 1 in front of it. So plus 3 minus 1 gives me plus 2x. And then finally we have a minus 1 and a plus 5. So minus 1 plus 5. Remember I said do these on the calculator if you're stuck. Minus 1 plus 5 gives me a plus 4. And then finally for C, we have 11b squared minus 3b squared. So 11 minus 3 gives me 8b squared. Then we have minus 7b plus 5b. So minus 7 plus 5 gives me minus 2b. And then the final part here we have minus 1 minus 9. That gives me minus 10. So check your answers on these, correct them if they're incorrect, and message me on Skillogy if you're not sure. So remember before when we were looking at adding and subtracting variables, and I used the example in class of adding apples and bananas. We can't add them together to make one item. Now we can simplify them. If we say that apples are represented by the letter A, we can call this 2A, and bananas are represented by the letter B, we can call this 2B. So we can do that, but we just can't add them together to get 4AB. Now let's look at what we do when we multiply variables. So you can see here now that we have the apples and bananas in brackets because we know that brackets denote multiplication. Okay, so when we look here, what this is the equivalent of, remember we said this is 2A and this here is 2B. Okay, so now it's a little bit different. We can actually multiply these together, and the rule is really simple. So first of all, we multiply the numbers, which we call coefficients, in front of the variables. So the numbers we have are 2 multiplied by 2, which gives me 4. The second thing we do is multiply the variables. So we have the variable A and we need to multiply that by B. And all you simply get then is AB. So then when I put these two together, my final answer is 4AB. So this is our rule number 2. When multiplying in algebra, we multiply the coefficient by the coefficient and the variable by the variable. Let's take a couple of examples. Okay, here's one example. 2b multiplied by 9c. So we know that we're going to multiply the 2 by the 9 as per our rule, and the b by the c. 2 by 9 gives me 18, and b by c just gives me bc. And that's my answer, 18bc. Over time you can forget about this step and you should be able to skip straight down to here, and I'll show you one other way you can do it. Okay, let's look at a different way of doing this. First of all, note here that my minus 6p is not in a bracket. It still means multiply though, so sometimes you'll only see one of the terms in a bracket, sometimes you'll see both terms in brackets, but no matter what, because we have the minus 6p right beside the bracket here, it still means multiply. So another way of doing this without writing everything out again is to look at your coefficients and say minus 6 by 2. So minus 6 by 2 we know gives me minus 12. And then p by q gives me pq. So that's another way of doing it where you use loops. So I call these little lines loops. I only want you to use this if you're confident in using it and if you know what you're doing when you're multiplying the terms. If you're not sure, go back to our previous method. So our previous method would have been to rewrite this out. So you get minus 6 multiplied by 2 and p by q. And then to get your answer here by multiplying those. So minus 6 by 2 gives me minus 12 and p by q. Okay, pause the video here and try this example for yourself. When you're done, press play and I'll show you the solution. Okay, let's have a look at the solution for this using the loop method. So we have 6 by minus 3, so 6 by minus 3 gives me minus 18. And then we have k multiplied by m, which gives me km. Similarly, if you wanted to write it out, it's 6 by minus 3, k by m, and we get minus 18 from multiplying these two together, and km from multiplying these two together. The final thing I want to show you is what happens when we have two variables that are exactly the same. Well, we can see the exact same thing applies here. Let's multiply the 3 by the 2, so that gives me 6. And then we multiply the a by the a, which gives me aa. Now, we can write aa in a different way. If we use an example with numbers, let's take to one side here. So, if we say 3 by 3, we know that that's the same as writing 3 to be squared. So similarly, if I say a multiplied by a, that's going to be a to be squared. We'll talk about the laws of indices later. So using this example, we know that a by a then gives me a squared. So I get 6a squared.